right, hello and welcome to our last panel discussion of the year. My name is John Golden from SalesPOP Online Sales Magazine and Pipeliner CRM. I'm really looking forward to this discussion. It's all about how you can start your next year as strongly as possible and make 2019 your year. And I have a fantastic panel of guests who are going to talk to you about this. So rather than me introduce them and read off bios, I much prefer each of them to introduce themselves. So again, my name is John Golden, and the first person I would like to introduce yourself is Michael Altshuler. How you doing, Michael?
Hi, I'm doing fine. Michael Altshuler in Boca Raton, Florida. Don't hold that against me.
And do you want to give a little bit of background on yourself, Michael?
Sure. I'm a keynote speaker, peak performance coach. Been doing this, had a company in New Jersey that I built up and kind of lived the American dream, sold it to a multi-billion-dollar a year company. And there's a law in New Jersey that when you sell your company in February, you must move to Florida. And who am I to break the law? So I followed the law and moved to Florida. And that's when I began my speaking and coaching career. So love helping people move the needle in performance, live better, richer lives. And that's what I get to do every day. It's a blessing.
Excellent. And John in Arizona.
Yeah, absolutely. So also I left Chicago to come to Arizona in January instead of February. So again, same type of path that Michael is on. But I've been in sales and sales leadership roles for the last 19 years in Fortune 500 companies, small startup companies. And for the last 5 years, I've been the vice president of sales here for a company called Factor 8. And so we are a inside sales focused training and consulting organization. So we work with companies all over the globe to maximize their frontline reps and frontline managers' performance and strategy. So that's what I do.
Fantastic. And Ruth up in Ontario, Canada.
Hi, thanks. Great to be here. Yeah, so my name is Ruth Van Vierzen. I am the founder of Rev Squared Business Growth Agency. And in addition to doing business speaking and training, I also provide services to business owners focused on sales, marketing, and operations, basically identifying gaps in their businesses where they could be losing money, sales, helping to fill those gaps by implementing systems and therefore increasing their sales and saving them more money.
Excellent. Okay. And for those of you watching, if you want to ask a question, just put it in the chat window and I will pose it to our guests. So let's get straight into it. As we know, we're coming towards the end of the calendar year, the end of Q4. A lot of people are on fiscal calendar years, and so there's a big push to get revenue in at before the end of December. And then what often happens is you hit a bit of a January slump, right? The start of the new year, because you put so much effort and focus into closing out the year. The beginning of the year can be a bit of a slump. So my question is, how can salespeople avoid that start of the year slump and really hit the ground running? Maybe Ruth, you want to start with that one?
Sure. Well, this is actually something that I'll share what I've been doing in my own business for the past several years, and I find it really helpful. I find as soon as October approaches, I start becoming pretty reflective on the year so far. And even though, as all salespeople and business owners, we are looking at our businesses constantly and evaluating, I find as soon as I get into the fourth quarter, I become really reflective and I'm spending a lot more time thinking about, what's been working, what hasn't, what didn't I get to that I really wanted to implement, and particularly also obviously with, sales that I closed or didn't. So I spend the last quarter, in addition to working on what I've got on the go, I'm also prioritizing and scheduling time to be setting time aside to reflect, to analyze my numbers and just looking at what's working and what's not. And then deciding on what projects I want to implement heading into the first quarter of the next year. So for me, the first quarter of any year, I'm hyper-focused. I'm working really hard at implementing a few projects that I've decided I want to implement. But the great thing about making that decision in the fourth quarter is as soon as I'm kind of back in my office after the holidays, I know exactly what I'm going to be working on, and I'm not wasting time strategizing my year. So I find, just setting aside that time to plan, to reflect in the fourth quarter is so important. You have to make time for it.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you, Ruth. That makes a lot of sense, because often everybody leaves it till January, until sales kickoff meetings and all of that kind of stuff. And before you know it, you're halfway through Q1 and you haven't really started yet.
Yeah, and just just one point to add, if there are sales professionals on the call or business owners, if they're part of a larger team, I recommend actually scheduling in a couple of retreats off-site in the fourth quarter where you really have that time to reflect and start planning for the next quarter.
Absolutely. How about you, John? What advice would you have for people so that they don't have that start of the year slump?
Yeah, I think a lot of what Ruth said was spot on as well. But I would say looking specifically at frontline managers and frontline leaders especially, I think the most important thing they can be doing during that time is really making sure the team understands what good is supposed to look like and what the expectations are during that time. Unfortunately, what I see a lot of the time is, the reps start taking their foot off the gas, and then the manager starts taking their foot off the gas, and everybody goes into coast mode under this assumption that customers aren't there. There's not a lot of business being done. We're going to coast through the last 2 weeks of the year. And I think it's really important for the managers to set that tone of, here's what we should be doing, right? While maybe the phones are a little bit slower, the appointments are a little bit slower, how are we setting ourselves up for Q1? So whether that's, outlining those goals, communicating those goals, having sales strategy or account strategy meetings, things like that, that we tend to not want to put during those prime selling times, we've got a little bit more bandwidth to have those kind of conversations. And I think it's really important for the frontline leaders to set that expectation and really lead by example during that fourth quarter.
Excellent. And Michael, what advice do you have to people to avoid this start of the year slump?
Well, pretty much John and Ruth said everything I was going to say, so thank you very much. Next question. No, everything they said was great. My spin on it is similar, but a little different. I believe that every day the pedal should be to the metal. If you're doing great, the activity level has to be the same. If you're doing poorly, the pedal has to be to the metal then also. It's all about habits, rituals, and routines, your mindset, your self-talk. And I believe all those things get affected and impacted at different times throughout the year, whether someone's in a slump or whether there's a holiday. I had some people, I have mastermind groups that I facilitate, and I had some people say, well, you're not going to meet on New Year's Eve day. Well, it's New Year's Eve day and New Year's Day, or Christmas Eve day, rather. So my question that I would ask salespeople and sales managers, there should never be a time, in my opinion, during selling hours that you should take the pedal off the metal.
Mm-hmm.
With that being said, yes, there's always planning time. There's always learning time, growing time, listening to podcasts and watching videos and listening to audio recordings. But at the end of the day, the activity level has to be there. And I would say this, that those that are taking their foot off the pedal gives an opportunity to those who really put the pedal to the metal to gain progress in their territory, because everyone else is laying back. That's a time when I really want to go forward, fast forward, because people are kind of laying back, getting ready for the holiday. I'm getting ready for more sales. I'll take those customers.
Yeah, I love it, Michael. And let's be honest, if there's probably prospects out there for you who maybe the end of the year is a little calmer for them, and that's the time when maybe if you give them the right information, they might actually start to consider some of your products and services, and that will tee you up for the new year, right?
Yes. They're a little more open during that period too. They're more receptive because the pressure's not on with them as well. So, and there's not as many salespeople calling them because everyone's laying back and you have an opportunity there. I think it's great.
So, John, what's some of the pipeline building advice you would give to people? I mean, this is obviously stuff that you can use all year round, but particularly as we go into Q1, what are some things that you can do to really build a solid pipeline for the year?
Yeah, it's a great question. One of the things that pops to mind is something that Ruth spoke about in her earlier answer, right? Was getting into, doing a little bit of that self-reflection and looking back on what the last year looked like and where your successes and failures were, and see if those trends are going to hold as you're moving into 2019, or how do you need to change your approach? But I'd also say that, again, this time of year, people tend to be a little more open to these conversations of networking, not only with your peers at your organization or people who you work with in your company, but getting outside of your organization and getting a little wider perspective on what other people are seeing that are selling maybe tangential products to what you sell, right? Or people who sell into the same market, and really start to get a wider perspective on where they're seeing opportunities or what trends they're seeing with their customers. because you need to be intentional when you're prospecting, right? You can't just go into the year saying, I'm gonna work harder this year. I'm gonna prospect more. I'm gonna do more. Do more of what, right? You need to be a little more intentional with your efforts. And I think this is a good time to start to figure out what work that I want to carry over from last year, and where do I need to shift my focus to be more successful, because my customers have changed, my products have changed, my industry is changing. What's new in 2019 that I need to shift and plan for if I expect to be successful next year versus what I did in 2018?
Yeah, excellent. And Ruth, what about you? What do you think you should be doing to build strong pipeline for 2019?
Yeah, well, something that I've been doing myself, and that I recommend sales professionals do is absolutely looking, like John says, looking at what's been happening over the course of the year and what's working and what's not. I've been evaluating the numbers on my autoresponder, so looking at the rates and what was really resonating with prospects in the pipeline. So absolutely doing an evaluation. The other thing I would say that sales professionals should be doing is looking at the process and seeing if they're missing out on opportunities where they could be automating that process. I'm a big believer in taking advantage of these online tools that we have for sales to automate as much as possible to stay top of mind with prospects. So I think there's an opportunity there to be looking at that and seeing if there are opportunities for automation. And the other thing I would suggest, and I'm just looking at the date on my computer, because I believe there's still time for this, and this goes back to Michael's comment earlier. I'm a big proponent of surveying our clients and prospects, using online tools to do that. And I think there's still time for sales professionals to set up a quick online survey, maybe not more than 10 questions. Here's a bit of a tip, and send it out to their prospects in the pipeline who they haven't closed, who were moving along the pipeline. They were being warmed up as prospects, and for one reason or another they haven't been closed. It's a great chance to reach out to them and ask them some really pointed questions about their experience through the process, just to kind of gauge where are they at in the buying process, and what could we have done better to get them to the point of maybe making a decision. And that's going to accomplish two things. It's obviously going to give you excellent data going into 2019 for improvements you can make. But if you do the survey where you're giving a prize, right? Like when I do a survey, I always give away 3 prizes, draw prizes. You can do them as Christmas presents right now. People are more likely to give you their information. Now you have prospects you can follow up with, and you have a legitimate reason to set an appointment with them and see now if you can actually move them towards closing that sale. Now you know why you haven't closed them. So, again, it's just an opportunity using a survey to actually get some data on what's working and what's not, actually from your prospects who you've got in the pipeline.
Yeah, great ideas. I like the idea of analysis, because I do think that especially in sales, everybody tends to just move forward, and although all the data is there to analyze, they don't really do a good job of analyzing the past. And maybe they think and individual salespeople can do this too, because maybe they think, oh well, that's a job for management, is analyzing, but you got to manage your own business. And Michael, what about you? What are some things you can do to build a strong pipeline for 2019?
A few things. One is sales. We all heard this. Sales is and will always be a numbers game. So you want to call on obviously qualified prospects. They have a need and they have money. But really the apex, my philosophy is a little different than most in terms of there's 2 sides to really reaching the apex of being successful in sales. One is it's a numbers game. If you only call 2 prospects or get 2 referrals, you can only sell 2 people. So how many people are you calling and emailing? And there's certain things, it becomes a behavioral thing that causes you to make those calls, or cold call reluctance that causes you not to make those calls. So that's number one. One side of the equation is how many calls, how many customer contacts are you making? The other side is, are you getting better on each of those calls? Are you sharpening your axe? Are your habits getting better? Are you getting rid of self-limiting beliefs? Are you improving your mindset? Are you aware of your self-talk? Do you have triggers to get you back on track during the day? So the one side, like I said, is how many calls are you making, and all the ways, and how much research you're doing on LinkedIn and connections there and using social media. But so it's how many customer contacts, and on the other side is, am I getting better? And here's what I would suggest. I looked up online the other day how many ways there are to lose weight. 6 million. You see, I'm convinced that most people know what to do. They just don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's tons of sales methodologies out there. Whoever's listening to this, you've been given a blueprint on how to be successful in sales. My contention is not that you don't know what to do, it's that you're just not doing it consistently. And therefore that becomes a behavior thing. And I'm convinced that it's about a growth mindset, your self-talk, your beliefs, and your habits, rituals, and routines. If you pay attention to those things and you improve in those areas going into the new year, you're going to make more sales or more calls, and therefore you're going to make more sales because you're going to improve your skill set.
Yeah, Michael, I couldn't agree more. I'm a firm believer in the fact I think that everything you need to know, you already know. And like you said, it's about application. If you can read 1,000 books and everything that is in those books, you already really know. And it's nice to read them again and to be reminded of them. But if you don't apply them, then they're just words, right? And I do believe, I think that it's all about application. So let's stick with you for a moment, Michael. And so, do you expect anything to change in 2019 as it relates to selling? And if so, what kind of changes are you predicting?
Well, I think we all know we're in the age of disruption and commoditization. So tons of industries are being disrupted, whether it's the mortgage industry, industries that we thought were safe or not. So therefore we have to adapt and we have to sell differently. And, there's tons of selling methodologies, whether it's relationship selling or spin selling, whatever methodology you adopt. The reality is if the industry changes, we don't have control over that. So there's going to take there has to be some creativity that takes place. There has to be value delivered maybe in a different way. You have to adopt and adapt to social media, and you have to really embrace that and use that more and use referrals more. And you have to find smarter and better ways to sell. I was getting ready to do a speech, and I had this gentleman come up to me as I was talking about this, and he said, I sell smart, not hard. And I looked at him, I said, well, let me ask you a question. What does that mean? And the second question I asked him, I said, what would happen if you sold smart and hard? If you did both? Meaning he called on large accounts, which I love because you maximize your time and it's more efficient. But I said, what would happen if you called on more major accounts? And he said, oh, nothing will ever take the place of effort, the right directed effort, and nothing will take the place with a better mindset and belief system and habits. So when you combine those two and you apply what's changing in the industry with including social media in the mix and maybe a different way to sell based on the commoditization in your particular industry, you'll do better as a result of these changes.
Yeah, I have to agree with you there on it's interesting. I think hard work has kind of gone out of vogue in some respects. Like people, it's such a simple, but people think it's it's an old traditional concept of hard work. But the reality is that those who, if you work smart for sure, but nothing replaces hard work. And what's that saying? The harder you work, the luckier you get. And I'm a firm believer in that. I think you make your own luck through the effort that you put in. So Ruth, what about you? What do you expect, if anything, to change in sales in 2019, and what are you predicting?
Well, yeah, and this is kind of picking up on what Michael was talking about in terms of shifts that are happening. And one of the things that I've really noticed in 2018 in particular is the tremendous political shifts that are happening around the world. We have, Brexit is in the news right now, and I don't know the acronym. The United States-Mexico-Canada agreement was finalized, and then we've got U.S.-China relations. So there's a lot of really big political stories going on, all of which have a tremendous impact on business. So what I would say going into 2019 is that particularly if you're a B2B sales professional, you've really got to become incredibly politically aware, stay up on the news, and get an understanding of how these bigger political issues are impacting your prospects. Because when we're approaching a prospect, if we want to get a competitive advantage over other salespeople, if we go into the call with a bigger picture of what these issues are that are impacting them, it's going to show that we've done our homework, that we're not just pushing a product or service solution, but that we can identify, we can relate to them on a larger scale. So I would say, yeah, if you want to get an advantage, if you're not currently following the news and politics, definitely start to do that as a salesperson.
Yeah, because it's an interesting point if you think about it. If you're selling into an industry maybe that's been hit with tariffs, and maybe the tariffs are working in their favor, they may be hiring, they may be investing in hiring, great prospect to sell into, vice versa. Maybe you need to approach it differently. How about you, John? What are some of the things that you predict for 2019, or do you see any changes on the horizon?
Yeah, I mean, there's always changes, right? And Michael and Ruth have alluded to them, right? Whether it's political changes, environmental changes in your solutions, in your offerings, in your competitive landscapes, your customers, all those things, you need to be so much sharper. I think the thing that I expect to see in 2019 is I expect to see a bigger gap between the really strong sellers and the poor sellers, right? I think that gap is going to continue to widen. What I see a lot of is people getting very reliant on tools and technology and automation, which are designed to help you do more of the right things. And people are using them as crutches to do their job instead of doing the work, right? And so, you'll run into a rep who gets a lead and is, how am I supposed to call this person who doesn't have their direct number? Well, how else could you find the number to the company? Maybe you could talk to someone there and they could point you to that person, right? Like, there were ways we did this before something fed it into your CRM, right? And it's just, again, people are so conditioned to having everything instantly available and all of this automation and all of these tools that when something goes off script, 80% of the salespeople out there or people coming into the sales world don't know how to handle it because they've never had to before, right? And the people who are putting in that work and understand and have multiple methods for engagement and have multiple contacts within their accounts and different ways to go about doing it, they're going to continue to get an outsized share of that business because they're better equipped to handle the changes, right? And you're seeing a lot of customers getting into that kind of, overdose of automation where, when they start getting you can see the patterns and the tells of what's an automated email and what's being auto blasted and whether they actually know who you are or not. And they're getting, there's a lot of resistance building up to that, right? So I think there's, my thought or expectation for 2019 is you're going to hopefully see some of the balance move back, right? You kind of pendulum swung to hyper automation, and then kind of come back to, okay, well, what are the tools that actually help me do my job better that I can leverage to be more effective and have better conversations with those clients when I get them? And what's the stuff that's just technology for the sake of technology and doesn't actually make me better? Right, that's what I'm hoping to see in 2019 is a little bit of shift back to that human touch approach and seeing again where those really strong sellers are able to widen that gap even further.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I call it the shortcut culture. I think that's what we are living in today, where everybody expects there to be a shortcut for everything. And it's like, if the shortcut's not there, it's like, oh, that's so hard. What? No, there's got to be a tool to do that for me. And you go, well, no, there isn't. Or yeah, there is, but it's going to take you twice as long and be less accurate. And it's an interesting point you make as well, because I think people have to look at technology as supportive, right? It's supposed to support what you do. It's not supposed to replace you. There's no magic. There's not that red button that what Staples used to have or whatever that you can just press on your desk and watch all the money come flowing in. You actually have to be proactive. Okay, so
John,
yes.
there was a few quotes that came to mind that I think speak to that. One is, and I forget the author of this, the road to success is all uphill. and the other one, it was a journalist, and I apologize for not remembering the journalist's name. And the other one is the elevator to success is broken. You got to take the stairs.
I love.
And we're all talking that. And you're right. These things all supplement and augment our success. They're tools, but there's nothing like a good conversation with a qualified prospect. And we are, with technology and iPhones or phones, cell phones, is just crazy how that shift has happened, and we're getting desensitized to that human touch.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
And Ruth, starting with you, what would you love to see salespeople do more of in 2019? Is there one or two things that you encourage people to really focus in on and just do more of?
Yeah, I would say actually just one thing, and it's do more follow up, and going to what Michael and John just talked about. there's no reason why we as sales professionals shouldn't be following up more. And I encourage having a system in place, a follow-up system, because once you have a system, it's just a matter of putting the steps into action, and you can either do it yourself, or if you're too busy, have an assistant do it for you. But I do recommend a combination of automation and then traditional methods of picking up the phone, setting up meetings. So, getting that balance of face-to-face, but also, online communication as well. The thing about follow-up is that when you look at the statistics, about 96% of sales professionals don't follow up beyond the 4th attempt. But most sales are made from the 5th as high as the 12th follow-up attempt. So that means that most salespeople are leaving sales on the table for someone else to grab. And my feeling is, if I've done the really hard work of getting the lead, starting to nurture the prospect, investing that time, and now I've warmed them up to the idea of a solution, but then I walk away, but they're not going to make the solution until the 5th to 12th attempt, that means I've literally primed them for my competitor to come and close the deal, which I'm not interested in doing. So I would absolutely, tell sales professionals, if you're going to do one thing to improve your process in 2019, put a follow-up system in place. But as Michael and John are saying, don't rely just on technology, so that you never have to get that face-to-face with the prospect.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. What fascinates me nowadays, Ruth, is I get a lot of prospecting emails and phone calls from people, and we tend to forget, when we're on the other side doing the prospecting, we tend to forget that timing is everything, right? I could get an email from you today. I'm not interested. I'm not going to open it, but I could get one from you in 3 months' time, and it just happens to be the right time. But I'm getting a lot of these ones where people go, they've sent me like 3 emails, and they say the 4th one is, I'm not going to bother you anymore. Obviously you're not interested. I'm going to take you off my list. And I'm thinking, well, just because I haven't engaged with you so far, it's probably because I'm either not interested. Okay, that's fair enough. Or it may not just be the right time. But why are you just abandoning me now? Because, as you said, timing can always be the key element there.
Yeah, if someone hasn't said no, keep them in your pipeline.
Exactly. What about you, John? What would you like to see salespeople do more of in 2019?
There's 2 things I would say, and one is fairly obvious, and you should be doing it all the time, but spend more time listening, right? I don't think, as people in general don't do a very good job of listening, and salespeople especially, we don't do a very good job of listening. We're too busy trying to figure out what they're going to say next, what we're going to say next, what's the next question, is this a good lead or not a good lead, what can I sell them, where should I be pitching, is this the right time, how do I overcome this objection? It's like, well, stop for a second and actually listen to what the person's saying. I listen to a lot of recorded calls and demos and presentations, and every time I go back and listen to it with a rep, there's this moment of terror in their face where they hear the customer say something really good and they blew right by it. And you're like, that was the selling opportunity right there. Like, had you just stopped and gotten out of your way for a second, you would have had it, right? That was the time, and you totally missed the moment because you were so focused on the next thing. And again, I would say something a little more tactical would be really focus on your disqualification efforts. Right. For me and in my universe and the reps I'm working with, right, yes is always the best answer, but a quick no is the second best answer I can get. Right. I don't want to have a bunch of garbage that's never going to close or not good fits. And salespeople are optimistic and we're programmed to think we can close everything. But if you know that based on everything you've learned about this company and what they do and how they evaluate vendors and all this other stuff, you've got a 2% chance of closing this. I'd much rather you go out and talk to 100 other prospects who you've got a 30% chance of closing than, and we get stuck on the one time it worked, right? But there was this one time this guy, and they told me it was a bad fit, and we closed a $100,000 deal. True, but 999 other times you were wasting your time and missed other opportunities because you were focused on the one that you knew wasn't going to close, right? And so I think it's just a matter of being a little bit more intentional and understanding what those good opportunities are and where you are a fit. And again, not to say that you want to just the first time you get a little resistance, you bail on it. But when you're looking at who the customer is and the qualification criteria, if you've got 5 key qualifiers and they don't check any of those boxes, unless something really unusual happens, they probably shouldn't be in your pipeline, right? And so I think decluttering that pipeline and being a little bit more assertive in your disqualification process will help you generate more sales in 2019 for sure.
Yeah, and I think that's a very important point. Is don't don't plan your life around exceptions about things that happen one off. Because I'll give everybody a fantastic story, and this is a true story of a place I worked in many years ago. But there was a salesperson who was hired and basically hadn't sold anything and was on the verge of being let go, and he happened to be the one staying in for lunch one day, and the phones were round robined, and a prospect called in, and it went from one phone to the next and landed at the one guy who was there having his lunch. The guy bought $1 million worth of the product that he was selling right there. Guy never sold anything again, but he was at President's Club that year. And after that held on to his job because they needed him to service the account. But guess what? That happens once. That only happens once.
And that goes to the point earlier when you said timing is everything, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You're in the right place at the right time, right?
So Michael, what would you like to see salespeople do more of in 2019?
I really think work on themselves. That's pretty much, when I had my sales organization, I had my sales team, I really focused on the sales methodology and the training, sales training. And what I realized is that every company provides the sales training to their salespeople. Why are the top 20% at the top 20% level, and why are the bottom 80% underperforming? They're all given the same plan. It happens to do with their mindset, their beliefs, and I know I go over that, but how do you fix that? How do you make that better so they reach that next level of performance? They stay at that peak level of performance. So I get very tactical, and I think it's important that their sales management gets tactical with their salespeople and helps fix them so they apply the principles, the sales principles and methodologies to get the results they need to get. And those things, there's a process in that. So some of the things I would suggest are you had to be part of a mastermind group, listen to audio tapes or podcasts, practice, drill, and rehearse what you're supposed to do. Put effort in, be intentional about improving yourself. Look at the areas that you're not strong. Have other people look at the areas that you're not strong, because we don't know when our own brake light's out. We need someone, a coach or someone to say, hey, you're not doing this well. This is what the top performers do differently. Understand that you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. To stretch and reach beyond your comfort zone is necessary if you want to be in that top 20%. They all push themselves to constantly get better and better. The other thing I suggest is triggers. We all have peaks and valleys throughout the day. We have great times, great days, and we have poor days. And those poor days perpetuate themselves, and it's about momentum. So what do we have to do to stay at a peak level performance moving into 2019 with our own individual production and leadership styles is, I'll show you something I use. This little empty light bulb here actually opens up. And if you want to make more calls, which you're going to have to do to be more successful, this is filled up with paper clips. And I heard of a story about a financial planner new in the business, and he said he was going to be number one at the end of the year. And they said, you're nuts. And he said, no, I'm not. How many calls do I need to make? They said 150 calls. He was on a dialer. So what he did was he got something like this. It was a jar. It wasn't a light bulb. And he got another jar filled with paper clips. And there was 150 paper clips. And every day he put a paper clip in the empty jar, or in this case, the light bulb. And that kept him focused and triggered not only the success of hearing it cling when it went in, but kept him focused on activity breeding success. And when he did that and he developed that habit, that kept him on track, and he did break the record and was the number one salesperson. So I really think you need to put things in place, people in place, triggers in place that will keep you focused on the highest and best use of your time, activity level, to get the results you want to get.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Michael, because I think there are so many other triggers out there and distractions, because we love saying today that, oh, we're busier than we've ever been in our lives. And when people say that, I always say, well, that's probably not true. You're probably more distracted than you ever were, because you think you're busy, but you're working, then a text comes through, then you go, ooh, Instagram, I wonder what they're doing. And then you say, oh, I have no time, but you've wasted a ton of it. But one other thing I wanted to mention, Michael, because I was doing a talk on this recently, and I know you're big on self-talk, and I came across in Psychology Today that 78% of our self-talk every day is negative, right? So if there's one thing you want to fix in 2019 is address that, because think of it, if 78% of the time you got negative self-talk, how is that helping you succeed?
Yeah, John, to that point, that's 3 full-length movies in your head that are running. Is it a horror film that's running? Is it a romance? What is it, a mystery? What's running in your head? Because Frank Outlaw said this, I'll share with you, that watch your thoughts, they become words.
Mm-hmm.
Watch your words, they become actions. Watch your actions, they become habits. Watch your habits, it becomes your character. And watch your characters, it becomes your destiny, all from your thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're not in control of our thoughts, your attitude is going to be out of whack. Your decisions are not going to be there. Your actions are not going to be there. And certainly your results are not going to be there.
Yeah. And hopefully then the movie that's playing isn't that one that Andy Warhol made, the 24-hour one where the camera was just pointed at a building and nothing happens for it. So if that one's playing, then you're in real big trouble. So, so John, so we talked about what we'd like people to do more of. What about what you would advise salespeople to do less of in 2019?
Boy, that's a really good question. There's a lot of different directions that you can go there. I think one of the things I would say, kind of piggybacking off of what you guys were just talking about, is eliminating those distractions, right? And making sure that you're setting yourself up to be successful. You know, when I first started off on the phones and going, I know my trigger is when that email envelope pops up, I have to see what it is, right? 99 times out of 100, it's useless garbage, but one time it's a customer or whatever it is. And so I had to set myself, when I was doing my call blitzes in the morning and in the afternoon, I shut down my email, right? If it can't wait an hour, right? Sometimes I may miss something, but the odds of me missing something that can't be handled in an hour are almost zero, right? But the amount of time it's going to save me and effort it's going to save me is going to be astronomical, right? And that repetition, and as Michael was just talking about, the habits and the execution and the repetition and over time building those results, that for me was a big difference maker, just being able to understand what was distracting me and what was causing me to get off track and stopping me from myself, right? So the more you can do to eliminate those distractions and pull those things out, so that you can actually make the most of the time that's in there, I think is a huge deal, especially as you mentioned, with the amount of distractions and the number of ways we can take ourselves off track and still feel like we're keeping busy. You have to understand what are the things that are holding you back and what are the things that are helping you be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. And what about you, Ruth? What do you think salespeople should do less of in 2019?
Yeah, well, I'm actually going to be speaking tomorrow to a group of B2B professionals, and I'm going to be talking about this point because it's about selling to the C-suite, the executive level. And a common challenge or a common complaint that executives have when they're being sold to by sales professionals is that the first thing that these sales professionals do is start talking about their products, features, and benefits. And executives aren't interested in that. What they want to know is, how is your solution going to fix my problem? So what I would say is one thing that sales professionals should be doing much less of in 2019 or eliminating is beginning the sales process by talking about how great they are, how great their products, features, and benefits are. They should start by focusing on what do they solve, understanding that their prospects have problems and that they have solutions to address those problems. And I think that will put them in a much more competitive position against other salespeople. And the thing that they can do to support that, actually, and this is a really good fourth quarter activity heading into the first quarter, is take a look at your marketing assets. So, what are you using for a website? What are you using for brochures? What's your presentation like? If all that those marketing assets do is talk about how great you are, how many awards you've won, what the features are, they're not serving you well as a sales professional. So I would say work with the marketing department if your company has one, and get them to shift their marketing materials for 2019 so that they're speaking more to pain points instead of just your product.
Great advice, Ruth. And what about you, Michael? What would you like to see salespeople do less of in 2019?
3 things. 1, less excuses. An excuse is an excuse. Own it. Kind of ties into the excuse part. Own it. This is your success. You know, Zig Ziglar used to say, you know, you look in the mirror, the board of directors just met, you want a raise, you got your raise. How much harder, how much smarter, how much more you're going to learn and grow. If it's meant to be, it's up to me. You got to go out there and make it happen. No excuses. 100% grind it out every day. Have the right blueprint, but you got to work harder. You got to work smarter. You got to grow yourself. So that means no excuses or fewer excuses, accountability, and be intentional and deliberate in getting better. What does that look like and what does that sound like? What are the specific things you have to do? And John touched on something earlier about, you know, the highly focused time and turning off everything. I couldn't agree more with that. We, in the mastermind groups that I facilitate, we had something, just a whole meeting on 90 minutes of highly focused time where nothing, the door's shut, the phone's off, and other than calls that you're making, outbound calls. And it's just 90 highly focused, like the magnifying glass with the sun burning a hole in the paper, that type of focus, where nothing, unless it's a family emergency, enters your mind other than what's in front of you. Everything else is literally pushed aside. It's just what you have in front of you that you need to focus on. That highly focused energy, you'll be able to do more in 90 minutes than you can do all day. And not only that, Zig Ziglar, again, quoting him, he's kind of my hero, my mentor. He said this, he said, when you go away on vacation, the day before you go away, how much work do you get done? It's like you get a ton done. You get a week's worth of work done the day before you go away on vacation. Why can't every day be like that? And that has to do with habits, rituals, and routines, mindset, triggers, focus, self-talk, all those things. Every day can be. That's why I said it's really not about January 1st, in my opinion. I think every day should be January 1st. I think you should be reinventing yourself. You should have the habits. It's how can I get better today than I was yesterday, but not as good as tomorrow. And I think that becomes a system and a process inside here and inside your heart. You know, the bigger your why, the bigger you try. You have to have a big why to get you to do this, because it's not going to be easy. But if you do that, you're gonna get better. You're gonna do more, and you're gonna have more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe January 2nd, because if you had a whole year of January 1st, that'd probably be a lot of hangovers for some people. All right, and Ruth, to finish off just quickly, why do you think 2019 can be a great sales year?
Well, I think for two reasons. I think, you know, looking at the kind of the macro picture, I think, you know, economies are going to continue to be strong, even though, you know, there's been talk of, you know, are the markets going to soften? Well, from what I'm hearing, there's an expectation that in 2019, you know, the economies are going to remain strong. So I think that there's still tremendous opportunities for sales professionals out there. And you know, for creative sales professionals who work as hard, you know, as hard as what Michael's talking about, they will find opportunities anyway, even in economic downturns, because there's always opportunities. Mm-hmm. The other thing that I wanted to comment on, and you know, I really do appreciate John's earlier comment about not using tools as a crutch, because I think that there is a strong temptation to do that. However, I'm a big believer in identifying tools that can really help the sales process, mm-hmm. can automate it in such a way that it gives us data, that it moves the prospect along, and just so that it frees us up to be focusing on as many prospects as possible. But again, it does require discipline, because to Michael's point, you know, we have to, it takes a lot of discipline, a lot of mental discipline to sell, to be a high performing sales professional. And that discipline, it has to come from within. It has to come from your mindset, as Michael's been talking about. So my suggestion is use these online tools, take advantage of them in 2019, because there's absolutely incredible tools out there that do help the sales process and can help with conversions. But do it, make sure you're a disciplined sales professional, and that you don't use them as a reason not to pick up the phone and not to be doing that face-to-face connecting.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Ruth. And obviously, we're a CRM vendor ourselves, so I would highly recommend. But I would say, though, on your point, I would say find the right tool or tools, but don't. One of the things that I've seen a lot of is that people run after every every shiny new toy that comes out, and before you know it, they've got a point solution for everything. You know, people have like 20 or 30 tools and they're using a point solution to do everything. You wonder, you can, number one, you can't learn that many tools, and second off, you're probably spending longer than you would if you did some of the, if you did some of these tasks yourself. So I would advise you absolutely find the right tool and then use it properly, but don't overload yourself with an unnecessary amount of tools. And John, why do you think 2019 can be a big year for sales?
Yeah, and real quickly, just to piggyback off of that, I think Ruth's point is spot on, right? It's about finding the right tools that'll help you do the right things, right? And let computers do things that computers are really good at, and let the people do things that only people can do. I think that's a really important balance. And I think a lot of that comes back to organizationally and strategically, somebody having a vision for what that process is supposed to look like, right? You need to define what the process looks like first, and then figure out which ones are the right tools to help you accelerate that process. Not go out and buy a shiny new tool and then figure out how to jam it into your system, because it's going to be overkill. And a former customer of mine, or an old customer of mine, said, the last thing we want to do is accelerate suck, right? Our reps suck on the phone, so why would I want them to have 1,000 more conversations? They're just going to suck 1,000 times more than they suck right now, right? Like, make sure they know how to handle a customer conversation, and then tee up 1,000 more conversations for them once they get a little better at it. But I think for me, the reason why I'm so optimistic for 2019 is, with all of this noise and with all this clutter and with all this distraction and all of this stuff coming at us, it's coming at our customers too, right? And I think our customers are hungrier than they have been in a long time for really good salespeople, right? Someone who can come in and, as Ruth alluded to earlier, they're informed on the industry, they're informed on what's going on and how it's impacting their business, and they have legitimate solutions to bring to bear. They're not just coming in to show up and throw up products at you, right? And I think those folks are going to make a huge impact on their customers, because they need someone to help them cut through that clutter, and someone they can trust, and somebody who actually understands the industry and what they're up against. So I think the folks who are able to understand, what is the business impact we're going after? How is this going to help my customer either attract new business, get into new markets, reduce their costs, operate more efficiently, whatever the thing is that they're driving towards? If I understand that and how we fit into that picture, I can have a very intelligent conversation with that customer, and it's going to stand, it takes a lot more effort to get to that point, but you'll stand apart from 99.9% of the other salespeople that'll talk to them. And it's going to become much clearer to the customers who are the good salespeople and who are the people who are going to be out of a sales job in 6 months, because the line is getting much clearer and much bolder, in my opinion.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And Michael, why are you optimistic about 2019?
Well, I'm actually optimistic about every year.
I know. I was going to actually preface it with that.
And every day. And I don't believe business is ever good or bad out there. It's only good or bad between your own two ears. And the reality is, I'm reminded of a story. Wayne Gretzky was one of the few professional athletes in the history of all sports that retired near the top of his game. And they were wondering, in the NHL, he was still a competitor, still one of the top competitors. So the person interviewing him said, "Wayne, you're still one of the top players in the NHL. Why are you retiring now?" And his answer was really profound. He said, "I still have the will to win. I just don't have the will to prepare to win." And the preparation, the hard work, the grinding. I'm telling you, Donald Trump was my largest customer in Atlantic City. I did millions of dollars in business with him. It wasn't easy. And the art of the deal that he wrote, we made tons of, we did really well profit-wise. But I got news for you. No one sees the work that happens behind the scenes to beat out 16 vendors and maximize your profitability, the positioning and knowing about the industry and the strategic planning and calling on resources. So my point is, yeah, you just gotta work harder, you gotta work smarter, you gotta know all the things you gotta know and do all the things. You have to pivot when you need to pivot. You have to surround yourself with people that are better than you, that you can learn from. You have to have that's the growth mindset. Understand that the definition, my great friend Mitch Hume said this, the definition of success is failure plus persistence equals success. We all fail our way forwards. We get more no's than we do yeses. It's that resilience and that persistence that matters. I'll leave you with this final statistic that was done a while ago on success. And they concluded that success and persistence are 2/3 of success. They're 2/3 of success, more important than talent and IQ, which in my case is a very good thing. So the key is you just have to understand that this is part of the process, that we have to get through these no's to get to the S. We're mining for gold, and you just have to work hard, surround yourself with a supportive environment, people, and things that trigger your success. Know that you're going to be distracted, and just stay focused on the goal, the highest and best use of your time. You do that every day, and every day will be like January 2nd, not January.
And yeah, fantastic advice, Michael. And I think the other thing is for people to realize is, guess what? It's hard work. Sometimes it's really difficult. Sometimes it's demoralizing, whatever. But you're aiming for the result. It's the result that counts in the end. So you gotta go through the process to get there. And the more effort you put into the process, the more likely you are to get the result. Okay, well, we're running up against the end of our time. This has been a fantastic panel. I have a feeling we could go on for a few hours. I would maybe bring in some drinks and the conversation might get too interesting, so who knows. So before we go, I'd like each of you, maybe starting with Ruth, just to tell everybody again a little bit more about how they can find out more about you.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. So the best place to go would be my website, which is revsquared.ca, revsquared.ca. But I'm very active on social media. So please connect with me on LinkedIn. I think my name's up there on the screen. I love connecting with people on LinkedIn and on Twitter as well. So yeah, those are the best ways to, and I give away a lot of resources on my website and on my blog posts. So I encourage people to go there and grab some of my sales training tools.
Perfect. And John?
Yes, so similar to Ruth, you can go to factor8.com is a great place to get connected with us, find out all the information that we're putting out there. Same thing, I'm also very active on LinkedIn, love to connect with folks out there and see what people are doing. Twitter, same thing, you can find me out there as well, love to connect. Great.
And Michael?
You can reach me at Michael, MICHAEL, ALTSHULER. So it's michaelaltshuler.com, that's my website. Also, I have a free ebook, 7.5 Ways to Achieve Extraordinary Goals. Yes, that was 7.5 ways. So if you really want to reach your goals in 2019, check that out. It's free, and it's the best of everything I've ever read and done myself. And also, I have an amazing podcast because I have amazing guests. I have one of the sharks from Shark Tank, the founder of BNI, Ivan Meisner. I really suggest you look up my podcast and Jeffrey Gitomer and just listen to these words of wisdom from some of the best in the world. And it's the Results Podcast by Michael Altshuler. The Results Podcast by Michael Altshuler. Because at the end of the day, we all want to get better. And as a result of getting better, we want better results. And I think those things will help you get those results.
All right. Well, thank you, Michael. Thank you, John. And thank you, Ruth. As I said, this is our last panel discussion of the year, and this has been a fantastic one. I've loved this. The time has flown by. Hope you'll all join us again in the new year for some more interesting panel discussions. And again, thanks to our guests, and thanks to all the guests who've been on these panel discussions this year. Hope you have a great holiday season, and all the best wishes in the world to you and your families. And hopefully get yourself set up and make 2019 your best year yet. Thank you.
Thank you.